She carries the location of thousands of hiding places in her head. What she buried, where, when, and who might have been watching her at the time. Then she forgets a quarter of it all. Out of that forgetting grew the oak woods that now cover half of Europe. This is the jay, a bird whose whole life runs on memory, except for the one lapse that reshapes the forest around her. Jays pair for life and hold a shared territory all year round. Courtship is built around food. The male breaks off a scrap and offers it to the female. If she's nervous and won't take it, he approaches from a lower angle, a less threatening posture. Sometimes the pair passes the same scrap back and forth until one of them finally eats it. Ornithologists were already describing this back in the mid-20th century, and they called it a ritual that binds the pair together. They build the nest together, a platform of twigs, lined with fine roots, hair, and the bird's own feathers. The female lays 4 to 6 eggs, pale green with brown speckles. Only she incubates. The male spends this time bringing her food. She leaves the nest for just a few minutes at a stretch, every 3 hours or so. 3 weeks later, the chicks hatch blind and bare. 3 weeks after that, they're on the wing. But they won't really be independent for another 2 months. The parents keep feeding them the whole time. A jay raises only 1 brood a season. Even here, in the most ordinary task any bird faces, raising young, everything runs on recognition of a mate, of a territory, of a nest among hundreds of identical trees. In 2012, researchers at Cambridge ran an experiment. They fed jays one type of food until the birds simply stopped wanting it, then watched what the birds chose to hide. Logic suggests if you don't want peanuts right now, you won't bother hiding them either. But the jays hid exactly what they'd need later for a specific future situation, and for 2 different situations at once. One food would be useful here, another there. The bird held 2 separate futures in mind at the same time, and overrode its immediate craving for both of them. Another experiment, this one from 2024. A jay watched food get hidden under one of 4 identical cups, easy enough to remember the position. Then the cups were swapped for visually distinct ones, and the bird had no way of knowing in advance that this would matter. After a delay, and with the cups rearranged, the jay had to recall the right cup not by its position, but by what it looked like, a detail it hadn't considered worth remembering at the time. The birds got it right 7 times out of 10. Psychologists call this episodic memory, not a record of facts, but a full imprint of an event, including the details that seemed irrelevant while they were happening. In humans, this ability emerges in early childhood and is considered a hallmark of a mature mind. Researchers also checked how this connects to patience. The better an individual jay performed on these memory tests, the longer it was willing to wait for a better reward instead of taking a worse one available right away. Memory, planning, and self-control turned out to be one system, inside one bird. The abilities we just described come down to the hippocampus, the part of the brain that stores spatial memory. In jays, it's one of the largest of any corvid. And it's not just larger, it grows. This happens in the fledgling within weeks of leaving the nest, right when the bird starts hiding and searching for food on its own for the first time. It's that very experience that drives the hippocampus to grow. Jays don't just hide food, they also steal from each other, remembering where a neighbor stashed an acorn, then coming back for it. So researchers tested something. Does a jay change its behavior when it knows it might be watched? They gave the bird a choice: hide food in noisy gravel or in quiet sand. Alone, it didn't matter which one she used. But as soon as another jay was nearby, able to hear her but not see her behind a screen, she switched to the sand. And if the other bird could both see and hear her, the choice stopped mattering. There was nothing left to hide. It already knew everything. The same caution works in reverse. When a jay is eavesdropping on someone else's cache, getting ready to steal from it, she goes quiet, calling far less than she would in any other situation. It's the first evidence of its kind in corvids. A jay can work out exactly what another bird can hear at any given moment and act accordingly. But there's a catch. The same Cambridge lab had earlier claimed something bigger, that a male could tell not just whether his partner could hear him, but exactly which food she wanted, and adjust accordingly. A striking finding that made headlines around the world. In 2021, they tried to replicate it across 5 separate experiments. The result didn't hold up. Science revisited its own celebrated discovery and wasn't afraid to say, "We don't know." A jay clearly knows how to stay quiet when it matters. Whether it can read another's desires is still an open question. Jays are homebodies. Ringing data show that 98% of ringed birds are later found no more than 50 kilometers from where they were tagged. An entire lifetime fits inside a single forest, one the bird knows down to the last tree. But sometimes in a single autumn, that attachment collapses. When the acorn crop fails across Scandinavia, thousands of jays abandon their territories all at once and fly out across the North Sea, chasing any chance of finding food. The most recent such exodus was recorded in 2021. A bird whose entire life runs on the map of its territory suddenly abandons that map for the sake of survival. In ordinary years, though, something else happens. The reason jays get called reluctant foresters. A single bird hides somewhere between 2,000 and 5,500 acorns each autumn. It carries them over 100 meters from the source tree in a single trip. And if it's carrying 5 or 6 at once in its throat pouch, that distance can stretch for kilometers. It hides them in tight clusters, spaced less than 2 meters apart, favoring loose soil in open clearings. That's why oak saplings so often appear unexpectedly, far from any forest, out in a meadow or tangled in blackthorn scrub. A jay remembers its own caches remarkably well, around 3/4 of them, but not all. The remaining quarter stays buried forever, and that's exactly where new oaks grow from. For a long time it was believed that jays single-handedly reforested Europe with oaks after the Ice Age. The reality turned out to be more complicated. Pollen records show oak advancing northward at 400 to 500 meters a year, sometimes faster, noticeably quicker than bird dispersal alone could explain. Scientists think it was a combination: the jay's steady, everyday work, plus rare but extremely long-distance dispersal events. The jay wasn't the sole architect of the forest, but it was one of the main ones. Out of a single memory failure grew half of Europe's forest. Science revisited its own celebrated discovery and wasn't afraid to say, "We don't know." A jay clearly knows how to stay quiet when it matters. Whether it can read another's desires is still an open question. The well-known fact about jays, imitating a hawk's cry to scare other birds off a feeder, turns out to be only a small part of what they can do. A jay can reproduce almost any sound it has ever heard. The calls of nearly any bird of prey, a dog barking, a creaking tree, a hen clucking, documented by ornithologists as far back as 1994. There's an even more surprising case on record. A jay was heard imitating the hoot of a tawny owl, not to defend against a predator, but to drive off a carrion crow, a competitor for territory. This is another form of the same memory, just an auditory one. A jay remembers a specific sound, together with the situation in which it heard it, then pulls it back out of memory exactly when it's needed. But this voice has another side, one almost nobody knows about. Beyond the loud public calls, a jay has a quiet, subdued song, a soft murmuring, nothing like the harsh calls most people are familiar with. It's sung rarely and secretively, usually deep in the forest, meant for only one listener, its mate. Not for territorial disputes, not for anyone else's ears. The same bird whose voice can frighten predators and bark like a dog saves. For its mate alone, a quiet song that no one else will ever hear. This bird has a mate for life. Thousands of caches with exact coordinates and the ability to calculate what a watching neighbor might have heard. And she forgets a quarter of it all. And where the forgetting happened, a forest grows.